Well, hello, everyone out there. Out there in these United States of America, this is Hoodrat Wars, the only show on 89.WIDR where we go after the globalists and we talk about what's actually going on in the world. Well, the liberal establishment doesn't want to tell you. Now, always, as they say, the following thoughts, views, and opinions are not necessarily those of 89.1 FM WIDR Kalamazoo or Western Michigan University, because of course it isn't. They're trying to restrict our free speech. Little did you know, George Soros owns the university, and he hires masked Antifas to harass American patriots like myself. They drive us off of campus. Do you know why? Because we're out there telling the truth. What kind of truth are we telling? Well, did you know that the city government of Kalamazoo is actually involved in a communist conspiracy? Yes, they're all communists, by the way. Least of which the billionaire communists who run the so-called Foundation for Excellence. Might as well call it the Foundation for Excellent Socialism. But yes, the city government is coming up with plans. What kind of plans are they coming up with? Well, have you heard about the PFAS in the water? Well, let me tell you something, folks. That's just a smoke screen. Because what they're really doing, they're polluting the water with a special chemical. It's not PFAS, it's something else. And here's what the chemical does. What it's going to do, it's going to turn all of your pets, your animals, your kitties and your doggies, and it's going to transgenderify them. It's going to transgenderify them and radicalize them. And okay, let me break it down for y'all. So, first of all, your pets, your kitties and your doggies are going to start dressing in gender inappropriate clothing. And then after that, they're training them to do this with this chemical. They're going to start fetching radical leftist literature and bringing it to your doorstep. What kind of literature, you ask? They're going to be bringing you copies of the Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. They're going to be bringing you copies of Cedric Robertson's Black Marxism. They're going to be bringing you copies of Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals. And much, much more. They're going to be bringing you books about phony made-up subjects like climate change and the economy. Little do people know the economy is actually made up. There's no such thing as the economy. The economy is liberal propaganda you hear from communist outlets like MSNBC and CNN, which might as well be called the Communist News Network. Am I right or am I right? Ladies and gentlemen out there in Radio Land. And after your radical leftist transgender dogs and kitties have brought the leftist literature to your home, they're gonna act real affectionate towards your children, and they're gonna try to pressure them to read this leftist literature. They're polluting the children's minds with this communist literature, and it's all paid off by George Soros. And of course, the communist billionaires that run Kalamazoo. They will not stop until every man, woman, and child is a filthy communist. By the way, April Fools. Sorry, I didn't really know how much longer I could keep going with that one. Hope you enjoyed a little bit of fun. We don't have it on the show a whole lot, but did want to kind of start the show off in observation. April Fools. I imagine anybody tuning in probably wasn't fooled by that if you're a regular on the show, and hopefully I was absurd enough that you didn't take me too seriously. So we're going to take a quick break. I'm going to let my co-host in, and we're going to go back to being the actual leftist, socialist show on Whiter that you all know and love. So stay tuned. We'll be right back as I let in the co-host. We are back. If you're just tuning in, you missed me doing some nonsense.
Oh,
really
absolute
being goofy as hell.
Garbage.
Yeah.
I was sitting here like, what radio station am I turning into?
Just so y'all know, the communists. There are no communists running the city, and they are not poisoning your pets to become transgender leftists.
Our other friend is here who speak of transgender.
Is a transgender leftist,
right?
Actually. All right, so
hold on a second.
I'm gonna let her in real quick. So when we get started today, we're actually gonna kind of open up. Lawrence wanted to start the show talking about kind of some dearly departed and some issues surrounding that, and then I think past that we've actually got some good news about the state of Michigan. Some key issues are kind of going in the right way or the left way, if you really want to put it that way. But why don't we go ahead and open up the show? We want to kind of say R.I.P. to Nipsey Hussle. He was really one.
Nipsey Hussle.
Nipsey Hussle. Oh, say it. Did I say?
Yeah, you said Russell.
Crap.
Like you said like the other white people that don't understand hip hop. No, it's fine. It's fine.
Russell Brand died?
No, it was Nipsey Hussle.
Nipsey Hussle. Sorry about that.
R.I.P. to Nipsey Hussle. Oh, for everybody, a random Lawrence has appeared and a random Nora has appeared.
What?
Yes, but yeah, dog. For if you haven't been hip to the news or you haven't been listening to the news. A hip-hop icon and a person who embodied the idea of giving back to your community, of taking what you have and trying to make the people around you better for it, could not be more of an understatement. Nipsey Hussle was a fantastic Grammy Award nominated artist. If you have not listened to Victory Lap, which was one of his Grammy nominated album, you need to, because Victory Lap was amazing. His first mixtapes was dope, and he was always about and he was a fantastic entrepreneur. Even though he grew up in his teens being in California, being a part of the Rolling 60s, which is an organization that's associated with the Crips, but getting out of that life and wanting to become better and making the people around him better for it. And if you want to support him and his family through this difficult time, stream his music wherever you can, because he owns his own masters and royalties, so that money is going directly to his family. Marathon Clothing, which is the clothing store where he was killed at. If you buy stuff online from his clothing store, that money also goes directly to his family. I definitely am going to be dropping some money this Friday, because they have some Malcolm X shirts and some Bruce Lee shirts and some other really dope apparel that I definitely support, man. And also, if you don't even like that and you just want to hear somebody say F Donald Trump and have a really dope rap song that's surrounded by why people don't like Donald Trump, then yes, listen to him and YG, one of their most famous songs, and it was F Donald Trump. So
I think that's still one of my most visceral memories from election night, was people cruising down the street after it became clear that he was going to be the next president, and hearing that song blaring from people's subs and whatnot.
Oh, man.
Donald Trump.
Yeah, dog. It was crazy. As much as there's some stuff to celebrate, which we are going to be getting to, it really bothered my heart that this man who had an argument with somebody, that he knew, the person felt some type of way about it, because the most dangerous thing in America is the male ego, and the dude came back and shot him and the people around him. You know what I mean? And at first, I didn't want to believe that a person who advocates against gang association then was killed by a random act of gang violence. But, the dude turned himself in. I'm glad that he did. He didn't turn himself up. He got arrested. The dude got arrested, and the accomplice turned themselves in. And I'm happy that the family will get closure, so they'll know who did it, and that person will receive justice, because for a while the streets was looking to get justice, and that's a whole lot different, especially in California.
Oh yeah,
street justice is not it's very different than normal American justice. But yeah, dog, his life and what he did as an artist and just as a human being, as an entrepreneur, is amazing. And if you haven't seen any of the tributes to him, any of the documentaries, or any of the things that he was speaking about in any of his interviews, please do. Yeah,
I hear that. Again, condolences. We've really lost a really important, because it's important to point out, when artists go out on a limb here and really are outspoken, and Nipsey Hussle, and again, sorry for screwing up his last name.
It's fine, man.
But
I'm just joking.
He had a deeper analysis of it than, because it's easy for a modern artist to go out there and say, oh, Donald Trump, he's a terrible president, But, he was very specific. He tied it back to issues that affected his community. and did it in a palpable way that even the mainstream media would listen to. And again, it's a really important voice that we've all lost, and condolences, and blast that song. Blast his album, but
his album, and also, but man, it wasn't even just that. In many aspects, you can look at him the same way that you looked at Ice Cube when he came out, or look at Tupac.
Yeah.
In the ways that he was talking about giving back to his community, opening up not just a clothing store, but a place for kids that are in Compton and in those areas that he grew up, Crenshaw and stuff. Creating programs that were gateways to jobs to Silicon Valley, teaching them how to code, teaching them those type of skills. Opening up a Creole restaurant to make sure that in hiring the people from that neighborhood to be in those in the businesses that he was creating. He was all about reinforcing the fact that that not only our money but our influence of people who are privileged, who are rich, or who are famous still are seen in our communities that have been devastated and traumatized for years. Because if the only thing that people see is the drug dealer or the gangster walking around being successful, then they're not going to see anyone else that they can aspire to be like. And he was trying to reinforce the fact that, even though you are a part of these things because you need to survive, you don't have to stay that way. And you can always be better. Mm-hmm. Ownership is a thing, and that's something that he talked about a lot. Innovation and ownership, and just crazy.
All right. Well, I think with that, I don't know if we're feeling about moving on to some other issues, going from California and Nipsey Hussle to talk about some stuff here in Michigan, and we've got some good news, a little bit of bad news. I think the bad news is stuff that we kind of already had a sense of, but there's this great article about a study that I want to get to later in the program. But we've got two palpable victories that I wanted to talk about. Yep. And the first one involves our governor, former governor, Tricky Rick Snyder, and a updated status
Slime boss Snyder. Mm-hmm.
Yep. And then some news about Line 5 that is also very important to talk about. So
and we also got to talk about the referendum that happened in Chicago with new mayor.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. That lady.
Yeah.
We definitely need to drop some jewels on.
Yep.
And me and Nora was at Yakanda. I was there for a little bit. You were there longer than I was.
No, I was there for a little bit too. I wasn't there for super long.
Nora, are you plugged in?
Hello, testing. Hi.
Yep.
Testing. Hello.
Speak.
You can hear my voice now. Hi. I wasn't at Uganda for very long either, but it was really well put together. I was really impressed by the work that Gwendolyn did, and I hope we see another sometime soon. It was fantastic.
Yeah, I think I also think the event's going to be super dope. Like I'm very excited to see what happens next year. It was a lot of people. It was a lot of kids. I mean, it seemed really dope. It was definitely really, really, really dope.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Really chaotic.
Yeah, unfortunately,
Yeah.
I was at work all day today. Sorry. I was at work today. Couldn't make it out there, but again, big props to Gwendolyn and everybody else who helped organize that very important youth event over on the north side, over at the Douglas. Yeah, like I said, I'm glad that it went well. I'm glad it's big turnout. Hopefully, keep that momentum going and have more opportunities for a lot of our young people to go out there and get connected with the community resources. So why don't I start off? Let's talk a little bit about this news about Flint and our former governor. So this is from the Detroit Free Press. It says Flint residents can sue former Governor Snyder over water disaster, judge rules.
Get 'em.
Yeah. All right, so A judge says former Governor Rick Snyder can be sued by residents in the Flint water scandal, reversing a decision from last summer. Residents claim Snyder violated their rights to bodily integrity by repeatedly doing nothing, as Flint used corrosive water that released lead from old pipes. Judge Judith Levy said a right to bodily integrity is a fundamental interest protected by the U.S. Constitution. Levy says members of Snyder administration had warned that switching Flint to the Flint River could lead to a potential disaster. The city was under state management in 2014 and 2015, and Snyder's Department of Environmental Quality failed to require corrosion control. Okay, so there's a lot to dig into this. I want to kind of broaden out the context a little bit. Let's remember a few key facts from back when the people start really realizing the extent of the poison water in Flint. This was a direct result of one of Governor Snyder's key policies, the emergency financial management he enacted shortly. I think it was within his first or second year in office when he was governor. And what happened was, because the city of Flint was in dire financial straits, they used that particular act that they passed to basically bring in these outside people to financially control the city. They made this financial decision to change the source of water, and even though they knew at the time that this could cause some serious problems with corrosion, with this potential lead poisoning, they did it anyway in order to save money for the sake of austerity. And because of that, you have a whole generation of children, and, well, particularly children, but also adults, who've been subjected to lead poisoning, who are going to experience mental health and health development issues for the rest of their lives, who've been effectively poisoned for years now, and still to this day, by this administration, by this former governor, who, when the studies and the evidence was popping out that Flint was being poisoned by lead-lined water, they sat on their hands and they did nothing, and they passed the buck of responsibility. Sorry, go ahead, Lawrence. It looks like you got something you want to say.
Well, I mean, I don't mean to interrupt your train of thought. I just want to add a little bit more facts on this. A lot of the doctors were being told. They were told by the government, which was being run by the emergency manager, to flub the numbers, to change the numbers, even though the children that was coming in that had higher lead levels on paper say that it was lower than what was expected. And that came from the emergency managers to the doctors and to the city government, which was under control, or was being was in part responsible by Rick Snyder. This means that when the 13 people, when the thousands of children that were poisoned, and if I remember correctly, multiple people died. At least the last time I remember, it was at least 13 people died directly because of this. At the time when this story was getting national coverage, it literally meant that the governor of our state helped facilitating the deaths and poisonings of American citizens. If the Black Panthers helped facilitate the deaths of multiple people by poisoning them, would this even be a question? Would this even be a discussion about what the criminal justice system would have done? If this was MS-13 that poisoned a city,
or ISIS, or so on and so forth.
Yeah. Like, are we even having a discussion? And this also goes to, and I hate to do this, I really do. This also is another shaming damnation on President Obama as well, when he went to Flint and pretended to drink the water, and until this day, Flint's water still hasn't been fixed. And the EPA lied. The EPA literally lied to the country and lied to the citizens. So it's a good thing that some justice is going to be coming now, but the damage has already been done, and that's the part of the problem.
Well, they have to win the lawsuit first for any justice to come in the first place. Yeah. I guess what confuses me about this story is I thought that a court already ruled they couldn't sue Governor Snyder. Something must have changed, or I must remember it wrong, or something.
No, you were right. Is this court decision reversed that?
Okay.
Yeah, that's what this was about.
So in case there's any, if you were like me and had some confusions about that logistically, now you know. But it wasn't just the doctors.
Disease.
It's there's really no underestimating the seriousness, lawsuit or not, of what happened to people of Flint, to this, this completely man-made disaster. And it wasn't only the doctors that were being told to lie about the actual lead levels. When operatives from like state and local government, this was revealed by Jordan Charlton, came to people's houses to do water tests, they made them run the water for about 5 minutes first, and then do the test in the water after that, which would artificially give them a lower results for the lead. And the water price, egregiously enough, the water prices in Flint, the same poison water is still like at really high prices, with the obvious intention to choke these people out of their own community.
Yeah, and I wanted to put a fine point on something too. There is something very important to the idea of this being reversed, and it's the idea of accountability under the kind of neoliberal late-stage capitalism that we live under. Because, it's exactly like you said, Lawrence. If you had a group, an activist group, a terrorist group, whatever, directly poison people, they would be sitting in prison right now. But because this poisoning happened as a function of these kind of austerity-centric economics, and, let's keep in mind, too, from a broader picture, this kind of economic tinkering, it's not exclusive to Rick Snyder or Michigan. It's part of that kind of conservative neoliberal agenda where you squeeze money out of these localities, these principalities. If the EU have had a lot of issues over the last decade and a half, particularly kind of strangling the people of Greece is a good example. Where you shrink their social programs, you shrink the money that's given to their infrastructure, and you look for ways to cut costs in ways that will be harmful to the citizens. And what happened in Flint is a very dramatic example of that. But keep in mind, this is a function. We can blame Rick Snyder, and we should, and he should be held accountable. I really don't understand. In a sensible world, he should be held accountable the same way as a terrorist group or something like that would. His decision poisoned people. But because it was a function of this sort of economic decision making, granted that was kind of more dramatic in Flint than many other places where these kind of policies are carried out. That's why he didn't see justice. And I'm harping at that point because I think, people need to make that connection. You can get away with this kind of wholesale murder and misery as long as you're an elected official and it's part of an economic plan that kind of goes along with this idea of austerity and that benefits people in power.
I mean, but also let's also remember that Rick Snyder lied twice. That he lied twice, saying that he did not know about this. That this was not a part of his doing. When facts have bared out, no, he knew. They chose to do this to save money because of his tax cuts that he gave to multi-billion millionaires and billionaires in the state. He chose to poison a city for the benefit of millionaires and billionaires that gave him money. And remember, Flint, these are part of his constituents, and he chose not to care about their suffering. He cut off the water. He didn't want to for the longest time give water to the residents of Flint, and he was going to force them to pay their water bills of poisoned water that they couldn't drink or get their houses taken. That's not a joke. That's not a punchline. That's a real fact. That's something that he did. Rick Snyder, in many ways, is as much of a sociopath or a psychopath as you can safely get without him actually touching or harming people. I mean, he didn't physically do any of the serial killing, but the people who died because of Legionnaire's disease and the kids that are brain damaged because of his decision, that's on him. Charles Manson is clapping in his grave right now because of what Rick Snyder did, because he's like, yo,
is Charles Manson dead?
Yeah,
I thought he was still alive.
I thought he was dead. So I'm saying if I'm just
we'll look
saying
that up during the break.
All I'm saying is that Rick Snyder he chose to not help the people who were poisoned. He chose to disenfranchise them more, and he did it to he did it for the benefit of enriching his friends. And now this is his constituents saying, yo, there's a bill that needs to be paid now, and you're going to pay it.
Yeah.
And shout out to Michael Moore for spraying Rick Snyder's estate, the mayor estate, with Flint lead water.
Ooh.
So, I mean, big shout out to...
And for those of you that didn't Google at home, yes, Charles Manson is dead. He died in late 2017.
Oh, okay.
So
I guess I missed that.
He won't be forcing people to drop a ton of acid and then murder people on his behalf to start a race war. But that's beside the point. Yeah. One of my friends suggested that this horrible abuse of the people of Flint, poisoning their water, then taking away their homes, might lead to them, when they eventually fix the water, to basically gentrify the whole city. But on the flip side of that, after what happened to Flint, who's gonna want to move there out of the white liberal yuppie class? I don't really see how that would add up. And I remember seeing a story a couple months back. The city government of Flint gave a grant of however many hundreds of $1,000s for a hotel in downtown, kind of like what we're seeing here in Kalamazoo. So it's clear that the local government's not, doesn't have clean hands about this either. There's, clearly having priorities that they're not adding up to. And if Elon Musk really wants to solve the Flint water crisis by throwing money at it, he's not doing it quickly enough.
Well, it wasn't just Elon Musk Elon Musk was helping. Bruno Mars donated $1 million. Puffy did $1 million. I know Jaden Smith was getting box water to people in Flint. So I mean, how
many celebrities is it gonna take?
No, it's not that. We need the Civil Corps of Engineers. We need the Military Corps of Engineers, the Marine Corps engineers, to go rip out the pipes, put new piping in, and they need to do an overhaul of the infrastructure in Flint. That's what needed to happen 2-3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
This should have happened 4 years ago.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Lawrence, because it's it's shameful that the only solutions or people who have been addressing this problem are people who have stepped up and And to the credit, I think what Jaden Smith did, he actually offered some filtration technology, but Again, it's embarrassing that like,
it's a Band-Aid.
Yeah.
They're all Band-Aid solutions.
It's a Band-Aid solution on a gangrenous wound. If I have a bullet wound in my arm that's still gaping blood, even if I put a Band-Aid on it, I'm still going to be gaping tons of blood because I have a foreign object in my body. You need to remove the foreign object to then heal the system around it. That's what needs to happen. And if that's not what's going to happen, and we're just going to placate, like this is the other thing. Like, if we're gonna just placate or just pretend like we're just gonna do these baby steps to this catastrophe, then what you see is a model for the rest of the country. Remember, East Chicago, Indiana, Brooklyn, and other parts of New York, Jackson, Mississippi, the parts of Texas. There are multiple states around the country that does not have clean drinking water, and they have lead in their water.
Most indigenous communities don't have running water, or even if they did at one point, they've gotten it polluted by oil or other companies,
right?
Messing stuff up over there. Like, there's a lot of it also with it being widespread is like, on top of us not really investing in our infrastructure and where it needs to go, is also the fact that these communities are just have been consistently ignored, and they continue to be consistently ignored by the powers that be. And I don't really see. I mean, I do see a solution, and that solution would be to actually tax the rich people and use the money to refix the water infrastructure for all these communities. But clearly that's not going to happen, so I don't see any actual solution to the problem in sight.
Well, the governor's not even willing to tax the rich to fix the damn roads.
Exactly. I mean, as far as austerity goes, I'd rather pay more in gas taxes than have a city be poisoned, but it looks like we'll end up having both.
Yeah.
I'd rather our new governor be like, hey, Blue Cross Blue Shield, since we have this, this mandate, and you're gonna make millions of dollars anyway, how about you help us out?
I mean, she does kind of have an in with those people,
right? You know what I'm saying? Why don't you give me a little portion of the profits that y'all got so I can fix this city? Hey, Nestle, how we weren't really charging you much money to take out water from the Great Lakes? Yeah, we're gonna have to renegotiate that, player, because I got a city I need to fix.
Nestle's still bottling up tons of water just outside of Flint, a couple townships over.
You know what's really gross about that? And I think I'll leave it on this point before we move on to the next topic. But if you, so I do see late night commercials sometime at work, and I've been catching this Nestle commercial where they brag about bringing clean bottled water into Flint. I kid you not. And they talk about it as just out of the generousness of our hearts, Nestle
whatever,
bringing clean drinking water into Flint. And I'm like, you MFers, y'all are less than 100 miles outside of there, and they're draining our water table for pennies on the dollar. It's just that's another furious thing about when capitalist philanthropists, quote unquote, they spend most of their energy extracting our resources and then try to sell or give it back to us and use it as a good PR. It's gross. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk some more about some stuff going on here in the state of Michigan. Y'all listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
You know what they call a quarter pounder with cheese and herring?
WIDR Kalamazoo.
This is a tasty burger.
It may not be apparent, but hunger is a rather prominent issue amongst the student body of Western. The Invisible Need Project is a multifaceted initiative that's aimed to help struggling students. Every 2 weeks, generous people donate their food to the pantry located in their Fawn Student Service buildings or other drop-off locations. All you need to do is grab a reusable bag and grab whatever food you need to help sustain yourself. If anyone's unsure when their next meal will be, or if you have a little extra food you'd be willing to donate, the food pantry is your place. If you're looking to help donate, become a volunteer, or just learn more, call 269-387-4742 or email dosa-inp@wmich.edu for details.
Hey y'all, we are back. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo.
That name, man. We've talked about that name.
What about it?
That name is hilarious. We never talked about why you chose that name for this show before I got here.
Do you want me to tell the story?
That is a story for another time.
Oh, okay.
We're gonna have to do like another podcast to talk about the reason why there are certain nicknames that are associated with us and why certain aliases are given to people.
Yeah, I think I'll just sum it up. There's a meme I shared recently. You know, some people learn about radical organizing and Marxism by going to university. Some people study it out of a trash can. I am the latter. Man. So let's talk a little bit. This is some more good news. I'm glad we had kind of a nuanced discussion about Flint because, yeah, it is good people to be able to sue Rick Snyder's murderous ass, but let's not forget, you know, the city is still poisoned and it's just tragic. But here is some actual good news. This is a really tangible victory. This is something that has really been one of the top priorities of a lot of Michigan residents and environmentalists for a long time. We have a very tangible victory against the Line 5 pipeline.
Hey.
So I'm going to read a little bit from this article here. This is at the Bridge, Michigan website. It's a non-profit news source. Good stuff if you're looking to track what's going on in Michigan. But headline is, Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer halts action on Line 5 tunnel.
Good job.
Yeah. On Thursday, Gretchen Whitmer ordered state agencies to halt action on a proposed tunnel to encase the controversial Line 5 pipeline in a tunnel. Whitmer's executive directive came minutes after Attorney General Dana Nessel issued a legal opinion claiming that a law creating a state authority to oversee construction of the tunnel is unconstitutional. I agree with the conclusion reached by Attorney General Nessel, Whitmer said in a statement. The Great Lakes are our most precious resource in Michigan, and because of their significance, I've instructed state departments and agencies to halt any actions in furtherance of this law. Nessel's opinion was her first since taking office January 1st, and it came in response to a request from Whitmer to review the law. Last year, both campaigned on shutting down the 66-year-old pipeline, and they opposed compromises, including a tunnel. The move puts Whitmer and Nessel on a collision course with Republicans that could likely end up in court. The Senate majority. Dude, I don't know if the author of this article made this typo on purpose. He's referred to as the Senate majority leaker, Mike Shirkey, Republican from Clark Lake. By the way, if the author of this article was trolling, great job. Keeping it 100 right there. I guess. It's like that's the whole problem. We're worried about this pipeline leaking and causing irrevocable damage to the Great Lakes, which we're kind of going to need in the next couple decades, like pretty bad. Anyway, he goes on to say, it is well past time to put aside political talking points and campaign rhetoric and just do the right thing. The administration needs to protect the people of our state, secure our critical Mackinac Straits, and approve the tunnel project immediately. Sinister. Because, building a tunnel, or I think as we've said in the show before, wrapping the tunnel in a condom, condoms ain't 100%. And frankly, we should not be sticking our trying to think of a radio appropriate term, sticking our dangling in the Great Lakes in the first place. Especially one that ejaculates oil. Anyway.
What a beautiful metaphor.
Yeah.
Remember that Bob's Burgers episodes where that one girl writes a song about the oil spill, but it's actually talking about sex?
Yeah, I guess I was channeling that, at least to an extent. For its part, Enbridge said it was surprised and disappointed. It wants Whitmer to declare, oh, poor Enbridge. Oh, Enbridge worked in good faith with the Michigan government on the tunnel project. Chief Legal Officer Bob Rooney said in a statement Thursday night, we disagree with the Attorney General's opinion. The benefits of the tunnel. Which, he didn't actually say it that way. I was kind of editorializing. Nessel's opinion kickstarted a new chapter in the short but complicated history of Enbridge's plans to encase Line 5 in a $350 to $500 million tunnel below 100 feet of bedrock.
The taxpayer's going to pay for if it goes through.
Mm-hmm. And it goes on to talk a little bit about the history of the tunnel, which I think we've kind of talked about on this show before, but I did want to talk a little bit about the legal specifics of Nessel's opinion. Nessel wrote in her opinion, the legislature violated the title object provision of the 1963 Michigan Constitution, which is meant to give lawmakers clear notice of what they're voting on. The provision says no bill shall be altered or amended after passing either the legislative chamber so as to change its original purpose. The far-reaching power transfer to the Corridor Authority Board, this is when they created the Line 5 Tunnel Authority Board, basically. That's what she's referring to. Far-reaching power transfer to the Corridor Authority Board comes without fair notice and is a surprise to lawmakers, Nessel wrote, because it's not mentioned in the bill's title. Michigan law is clear that where the body of an act exceeds the general scope of what is expressed in the title, the offending provisions violate the state's constitution. All right, so I'm going to throw it over to y'all. So, again, this is something that environmentalists have been fighting for a lot. I actually know there were some Standing Rock alum, some Michigan Standing Rock alum had organized a protest camp up there, the Anishinaabe camp up near the Mackinac Straits. And there's been other significant resistance from a plethora of different environmental groups around this issue. This is definitely a victory. However, as the article indicates, the fossil fuel sycophants in the Michigan State Legislature are certainly not going to go down without a fight. So
there's not a whole lot more to say about this other than it's good that Dana Nessel is doing what she promised and that Gretchen isn't trying to stop her with it. But it is also worth mentioning that the House leader tried to claim that their decision was based on emotion, as if
they're not running commercials on TV and on YouTube talking about how Line 5 is a good thing and they've operated safely when the company that's been a part of their that's run pipelines before, that company Enbridge has leaked before.
Most famously right here locally in the Kalamazoo River.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
So when you have commercials of Enbridge saying, we've operated for years, and we've operated under the most safest of standard conditions and all this garbage. When we are living in Kalamazoo, what the? Yeah. And
I mean, it hits. I'll let you finish.
Yeah.
Just interject real quick. I mean, this issue does hit really close to home for anybody who remembers. That was back in 2010, I believe. At the time, it was the largest inland oil spill in American history, and a lot of us had neighbors. A lot of us had family, had friends who ended up developing like severe health issues. People died. Like, Enbridge's negligence got people killed. And this is not something that's easily forgotten by the people of Kalamazoo. And, it was really just, it's so disgusting, especially for me to think like about like this issue of Line 5 and how like the Republicans and Rick Snyder, etc., who, just a few years ago were, especially I'm thinking of like people like Fred Upton, were like poo-pooing Enbridge. It was like, oh, you guys messed up. You guys messed up. You did. And then turning right back around and saying, go ahead and build this tunnel, or go ahead and keep Line 5 operational in the Straits, which is literally like, if a leak were to spring there, I really cannot underscore how disastrous it would be for the ecology, economy, environment of Michigan. It's literally like one of the worst places in the country for a leak to happen, because it would spread basically through the lake, down Lake Michigan, through Erie, etc. And it would be extremely hard to collect that oil, particularly
Dog, we haven't even finished cleaning up the one that happened in Kalamazoo by Enbridge.
Yeah.
Now remember, the same things that the commercial that Enbridge was saying was the same thing that they said at Standing Rock, and Standing Rock leaked 5 different times before last Thanksgiving.
Yep.
Like, come on, son. Son.
Only there have been some people who could have predicted that.
Only there were people who were literally fighting against that thing happening. Like, I think the thing that pisses me off about, I think the thing that makes me happy about this, but also the same thing that pisses me off at the same time, is we act like we don't have 11 years to get our lives together before catastrophic climate change destroys our planet, and things like this will help do so. And I think the other thing that also pisses me off about this, the good news is that yes, Dana Nessel and others are fighting on the right side of history. Earth Day is coming up. Shout out to David Benak for running Earth Day, the Earth Day program here in Kalamazoo. But at the same time, the issue that I have the most is that do you really think that they're not going to try to do this again? Do we really think that they're not going to try to keep trying to push for this type of thing to happen again? And when that spill happens, will Enbridge and the banks that supported Enbridge be held responsible for the leak that happened? Are they going to clean it up, or is it going to be coming out of taxpayer dollars again? Because if it's coming out of our pocket again, and we're saying, "Nah, bruh, y'all tripping," then I'm have an issue.
Nora, was there?
No.
I thought you raised your hand or something. Oh, sorry. All right. Again, not too much more to say beyond that. I mean, again, we talk about climate issues time and time again. I know I think it does highlight, last week we discussed an article about how climate change is going to directly affect the Great Lakes. Yeah. And again, it's really just, it's demoralizing to see, again, we're at this crux. We're in the greatest emergency in human history, and we really can't underscore the moral bankruptcy of people in our legislature, of corporations like Enbridge here in Michigan that pretend that this crisis is not happening, and again pursue policies that would accelerate it.
Doc, speaking of moral bankruptcy or the lack of pursuing policies, that reminds me, we need to speak on Pete Buttigieg. Buttigieg. Pete
Booty Bag, Booty Juice.
Pete Butt Stuff.
Pete Butt Stuff.
No, his.
All right.
No, I swear to God, I know how to. Look, I've been practicing trying to say this name, dog. Hold on, dog. I said I was gonna get it right because I don't want to keep mocking him.
Y'all get started on that. I'm gonna go to the bathroom.
Buttigieg. Okay, Buttigieg. All right. He is a judge of booties. This is the problem that I have. He had an interview. He had a couple interviews recently, and one of the things that he talked about was that the Democrats have been too focused on specific policies. That we need to focus more on the philosophy and ideas and putting our values and philosophy to the forefront and instead of actual policy substance to the forefront. He's running on a literal hope and change platform that or a stronger together united platform. It was nothing. I forgot. I think it was a Vice interview where he did this, where he's focusing more on nothing, literal nothing, so he could say, "Hey, the policies that I did fight for and give you, you know, I'm kind of sticking by my word, even though I'm actually literally saying nothing." So I mean, like it was so frustrating to see his interviews and Cory Booker's town hall all within the same week. Like it was.
I'd be so worn out from platitudes at that point.
Oh my God! Here's the thing. I'm gonna get to Cory Booker. We're gonna have to get to Cory Booker, especially how he dodged the reparations questions and a couple other things. But the thing about Buttigieg.
It's a boot edge.
Buttigieg. The thing about Buttigieg was that I actually thought he was okay until I started to look at. I thought he was okay until I actually started to watch the interviews that he did, where he doesn't care about actual policy substance. He says that anybody who has clear policy substance goals right now is being lying and disingenuous because he doesn't have actual policy substance goals that he will actually stand on. So he's not standing for anything, but he wants to tell you something nice that you want to hear. That is the most ass backwards thing that I have seen from a politician, utterly not understanding that a populist, a progressive who actually has concrete policies is what the American people want. So you didn't pay attention to anything that happened in 2018. Where the people
16?
who...
Well, 18 too, I guess. But yeah.
No, 16 and 18.
Yeah.
16, because who had the platitudes and cliches the most? And who won?
I believe a lot of the big winners were, like the DSA candidates, and even a lot of people I would probably consider a little bit more centrist, but at least like had actual like platforms and knew what they were talking about.
So when you break down the barriers and you put hope on the ballot and
lead with our values.
Yeah, you lead with your values. Then we're gonna win. No, you're not. You didn't win. You like the people who actually cared about the subject things that they were talking about won.
See, this is something that we go back to a lot in the show, and it's no secret that Pete Buttigieg is not the only Democrat running for president that's running almost solely on platitudes. But like
Cory Booker too. Yeah,
there's like at least half of them, but probably more. I'm being generous. My point is, there's on a first glance, there wouldn't seem like there's a lot that sticks out about Buttigieg, other than the fact that he would be, yes, technically the first millennial elected president if he won. He would also be the first openly gay person elected president if he won, which would have been unthinkable even a decade ago.
I mean, that's good for identity politics, and he also judges booties, but that's cool.
he does. The reason that you gotta pronounce boot in his leg is that I did look into some of his policies, and you pronounce boot in his leg is his name because he's a bootlicker, So a lot of the things I've seen, and he had this tweet about trying to make some point about gun control, but like basically had a roundabout way of saying it's cool when we use assault weapons to murder black and brown people abroad with our imperialist wars.
He doesn't support Medicare for all, and he's for all forms of Medicare for all, and so he's starting the negotiating process from the right.
Oh boy. Well, one thing I will commend him is he did based off his record as a mayor in South Bend, Indiana, he did do a very good job there with like. I'll emphasize. What is it? It was investments in infrastructure and affordable living, which are both very important to like across the country issues, even though like a lot of them are based on state and locality, which is how they're lobbied. But with these other issues that he's like not, taking credence to, like doing stuff about our imperialism, Medicare for all, and not even standing up for journalists. Like I saw an interview that he did at South by Southwest where he just kind of talked about how he's so concerned about what Chelsea Manning did, which was telling the truth, by the way. And he was like not only concerned about Chelsea Manning, but like the fact that her sentence got commuted, like as if he would have let her stay in there for longer, which is really egregious and like kind of highlights just how like cis gay dudes don't really give a damn about trans people, and it's gross to watch.
Yeah, hold on.
I hear that.
But also let's transition that to
pun intended
to what AOC said. AOC talks about Chelsea Manning and talks about how what happened to her is inhumane, and also that she needs to be released, and that she's a war hero. So the issues that I had. The issue that I have with this person is that they believe that they can win by saying and doing nothing, by being an anti-Bernie but not giving anybody a reason to vote for them. And for a lot of people, they are being tricked by him to give him money, and they support him. Even though there's no actual policy.
Wait, are we talking about
why.
Pete or Beto? Because like it's kind of the same.
Pete,
thing.
Beto, and Cory.
Mm-hmm.
You weren't in the room when I talked about it, but Cory Booker's town hall and listening to people to judge interviews all last week just was killing me on platitudes and cliches. And I need to get to Cory Booker too, because his town hall has some stuff in it that made me rip my eyes out.
Ouch.
That dog, like, okay, it's not even okay. Here's the thing. Cory Booker's town hall, it was interesting. Him, Beto, and Pete are all playing the I'm Obama light type of role. They're not as charismatic, but they're playing that type of I'm a clean cut politician role. And for one, CNN gave Cory Booker such kid gloves. In comparison to Warren, and in comparison to Bernie, and in comparison to Tulsi, they gave Cory Booker the most softest kid glove questions I have ever seen in my entire life. This far, when it came to how he's being judged. First of all, the reparations answer, which is not getting any type of news coverage about what he said. He basically said that he agrees with Bernie and Tulsi and Warren that they support HR 40. That's good. And he talked about baby stipends. Baby bonds or baby stipends. Basically, whenever a child is born, they will basically be able to earn $50,000 until they hit the age of 18. It will be as a guarantee for them to be able to build wealth, go to college, and things of that nature. Great policy. It's not reparations. So he gives this long platitude answer on why he doesn't like the question. But the question was, do you support a straight cash payout to those descendants of slaves? And he goes on this long answer to basically say, no, I don't support it. But then at the same breath, he says, but yes, I support reparations. But no, I don't support that. And I'm sitting here like he's doing a really good Obama impersonation. I'm going to talk out both sides of my mouth and talk about things that has nothing to do with the question. Like he talks about good policy. He deflected to good policy, because I do think the baby stipends is a fantastic policy, but it's not reparations, which was the question that was asked. Him backtracking on Medicare for All, saying everybody deserves affordable access to health care. Again, for those who are not political junkies like we are, when someone says access, they don't mean affordability.
That's like a kind of a code word for I am not for universal health care.
Yeah. He says everybody deserves he said everybody deserves a right to access. Yeah. I have a right to access to I have a right and I have the access to buy 50 cents a mansion right now if I wanted to go on my phone to try to buy it. Do I have the money to do so? No. I have access to a burger if I wanted to walk down the street to get some food. Do I have money to get it? No. Now, healthcare is not a burger or a house. But what I'm saying is that access is different than affordability or having healthcare as a right, which is what the universal healthcare system is. He's not going to fight for it. He is too soft to go against Donald Trump. He's going to get Marco Rubio.
Well, I mean, what's this whole thing like? Oh, we're gonna fight it with love. Like, what is he just gonna be on the debate stage like a Care Bear? I'm the centrist Care Bear.
He's gonna give he's gonna give Trump hugs. You know what I'm saying? He's gonna say, Trump, your words hurt me. Yeah. He's gonna do the Muppet Babies theme, and you know what I'm saying, and say, please be careful, words can hurt. You know what I'm saying? Like it's upsetting, it's infuriating, because Cory Booker has all this wonderful passion when it comes to him getting on camera and grandstanding for his own political benefit, but when it comes to actually fighting for a policy that will save lives, he won't do it. And that's the thing that pissed me off the most with his answer about healthcare, also the answer about reparations. Is I'm like, while you are dancing around these issues when we're supposed to have a serious conversation about it, and you're placating and trying to position yourself so you can see what will best work for you politically, people will die. Lives will literally be ruined because of your lack of judgment and your lack of character.
Yeah, man, and I hear that, and like it's I wanted to highlight too, like here's what's dangerous about that. You know, if you have a platform to be talking about the Trump administration as somebody who ostensibly is hoping to run against him in 2020, how are you not spending your time like addressing him, calling out like the atrocious stuff that his administration is doing? I wanted to take a little side note here and talk about, like, you know, here's something that like a lot of people have been talking about was Trump is threatening to close down the border. He's threatening
to shut down the southern border. It's amazing how they want to put a wall around the southern border and not put one around the northern border. Ain't that about something that I can't say on the radio? But
and at the same time, he's also pulling out he's reducing leveraging aid to places like Honduras, Guatemala. I can't remember the third country, but it's saying like, we're not going to give you any more aid as long as these refugees are coming up, which is, let me explain on two levels why that's horrible and asinine and atrociously stupid. So for one, the sanctions, that aid is what's to the extent that people are staying in Honduras, etc., that aid directly goes to programs that are designed to keep them there. Now, let's be clear. The government of Honduras, they ain't angels. They're pretty damn corrupt themselves. But bottom line, by no longer sending them aid, that's going to make the situation objectively worse. You're only going to get more refugees coming from these places. Anybody who's even halfway intelligent understands that. Of course, I think to a certain extent, I think, it
Our
could be a long
president's not
term.
halfway intelligent.
It's yeah. Well, I would also say, like, not to underestimate them too much. Like, they could be trying to inflate the numbers. So, like, I mean, the whole thing is he's like trying to create this false emergency. This sense that, like, oh, there are these invaders coming up from Latin America. They want to get into our country. I mean, that's the way that this man's and his administration's kind of xenophobic, white supremacist character functions. But again, I feel like it's almost deliberate to say, because, like, if you actually look at the numbers, yeah, it's easy to say, like, actually immigration is down. Actually, like, our highest peak of immigration was around 2003, and it's gone substantially down since then. What you need to do, if your power base is all in, like, holding on to, like, all these kind of racist white reactionaries who believe your BS, you need to actually create some refugees to come up and actually be the threat that you are talking about, even though they're not a threat at all. They're seeking asylum from oppressive regimes that, and here's point number 2, that we helped to create. Our government created this problem. And again, we could spend hours talking about the history of U.S. coups and imperialism in Latin America, but the ultimate and most bitter irony, particularly thinking places like Honduras, Guatemala, etc., is that, I mean, Honduras wasn't that long ago. We're talking like 2009. When our government facilitated a coup against the democratically elected president of that country. And now we're turning around and saying, like, oh, this crisis we created? Well, not only are we going to make it even worse, but we're going to blame you, the country of Honduras, the kind of puppet dictator that we installed, for the refugee crisis that you have, even though we are the ones who put you in power in the first place.
I mean, it's the same thing that happened with Nicaragua, man. Like, you see the same things that we're doing very similarly to Venezuela. Like, we are a lot of times the architect of the chaos, so we can benefit from said chaos. That's been America's playbook for years. I would say before we take our break, because we do have to take our break and we have been running over time. We are always running over time. Dog, like, we never stick to the plan.
Mm-hmm.
Important news doesn't take a day off. That's
Okay. So there's a bunch of quick hits that I want to get to. But
can I do some quick hits first?
Go ahead.
Okay, so it's Trans Visibility Week, and I've been recommending people on social media to celebrate by supporting Chelsea Manning, whether that's writing her a letter, giving to her legal support fund, or you can find T-shirts and a Bandcamp album to buy that would even go to support her legal fund. So go ahead and do that. You would find it on the Chelsea Resists Twitter. It's also worth mentioning that, though gratefully we're finally starting to talk more about trans issues, like it's in the public discussion more than ever before. It still hasn't really gotten much better for actual trans people. Like, trans women of color and sex workers are still getting murdered, and
rates much higher than the general population.
Yes, at an absurd rate. There's still like a lot of us still have a hard time adjusting to society and all that stuff. And there's an article on them.us about it that I'd recommend reading as well. And those are the quick hits I have for now. I gotta take off. I just found out that I'm sick, so have a great night, y'all.
I'm sorry, it's that capitalism has got to you.
Guys, we're supposed to take a break a long time ago.
I'll tell you what. We will take a break. I did want to put a pin on the whole border thing. There's this article I found today It's really good analysis of it. It's from the World Socialist website, and I just want to read a little bit, just to put this in a broader context, because again, we were mostly criticizing Trump and his administration here, but this is part of like a larger and really, very scary trend. I'm going to quote directly from it real quick. This irrationality, however, lies not merely in the twisted and criminal mind of Donald Trump, but in the capitalist system itself, and in the irreconcilable contradiction between the global integration of production and the capitalist nation-state system. Trump is not some mad exception. Europe has effectively sealed its own borders to desperate migrants seeking refuge from the effects of 17 years of uninterrupted U.S.-led wars in the Middle East and Central Asia. The Mediterranean has been turned into a no-go zone, where 34,000 people have lost their lives. European Union member states have built over 600 miles of border walls since 1989 and deployed an additional 10,000 armed guards to keep out or deport anyone who makes it to the continent. The sealing of borders, the laying of razor wire barricades, the creation of concentration camps for refugees, and the whipping up of far-right, xenophobic, and fascist forces are all part of an international turn to a reaction that echoes the darkest days of the 1930s. The buildup of militarized borders and the forces of state repression are directed against not only migrants and refugees, but the working class as a whole. In the U.S., Europe, Mexico, Latin America, the Middle East, North Africa, and Asia, workers have entered into explosive struggles that have emerged for the most part outside of the control of official pro-capitalist parties and trade unions. By the way, I would really recommend everybody, check this out. It's on the World Socialist website. It was published today. And the headline is "The Threat to Close the U.S.-Mexico Border." So with that, let's go ahead and take a break. Y'all listen to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
What's up, everybody? It's RJD2, and you're listening to 89.1 WIDR FM, Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Is your RSO looking for new ways to get its name out to Western's campus and the greater Kalamazoo community? Why not use the wider airwaves? For more information on how we can work together to promote your organization and events, go to widrfm.org and click on the Airtime and Sponsorship page under the Support tab.
Depression can take many forms. It can feel like static in your brain, or as if everything around you has lost meaning. It can debilitate even the strongest of people. 89.1 WIDR is here to tell you that there is help and a way to improve mental health. WMU offers counseling for all students in the greater Kalamazoo community at Syracuse Health Center. There is no need for an appointment for first-time visits. Open counseling times are Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Friday from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. or Thursday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Syracuse is located at 1903 West Michigan Avenue, Kalamazoo. For more information, please call 269-387-3287 or visit www.wmich.edu/healthcenter.
Hey, y'all. We are back. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. Again, want to thank my co-hosts, bringing some great insight on the show. Going to be flying solo for the rest of the program. Wanted to pivot kind of back to some Kalamazoo news. This is some Michigan news, and then I'm going to pivot back to some Kalamazoo stuff. But I wanted to talk about this article. This is out of Crane's Detroit Business, and that's important to highlight. This is actually kind of from a business outlet, so this is from the capitalists themselves. And I always like to share these articles that are like from capitalists that are critical of current economic situation and of kind of capitalism itself. And it's kind of a temperature check of the problems in the Michigan economy. So I want to read a bit from it, maybe offer a few of my own little insights along the way. But this was an article published by Dustin Walsh on March 20th. And the headline is, Michigan's working poor grows to 43% of all households. I'm going to just read from it a bit. Nearly 1.7 million Michigan households in 2017 earned less than what they need to make ends meet, according to a report released by Michigan Association of United Ways. Healthcare and child care costs dominate the budgets, and let me talk a little bit about what the report went on to say. So, the bare minimum of the household survival budget defined by the United Way has increased by 26% for single adult and 27% for a family of four. For a family of four, this means earning full-time wages of $30.64 an hour to cover the bare minimum budget, the report said, while a single adult would need to earn $10.52 an hour. The major causes of the survival budget increase are healthcare costs and taxes or lack of tax credits, which spiked 98% and 83% monthly between 2010 and 2017, according to the report. The tax increase is caused by higher prices for all other categories and higher relative earnings needed to cover expenses. The biggest costs remain child care, which averaged $1,122 monthly in 2017 for a family of four. So, just wanted to touch, some general points. I won't dive into them, but I do want to point out two things in particular here. Healthcare costs, childcare costs. Again, these are two things that in most modern countries, whether you're talking about the kind of social democratic states of the Scandinavia, even the more kind of capitalistic centrist states that you have in Europe and the European Union, most Western countries by default do this. Even a lot of countries that are, quote unquote, according to certain global indices, less developed than us, have universal health care, have universal child care programs. This is a very unique problem to the United States, where we don't offer this very basic service to our citizens. Most countries, this is paid through tax money that gets, again, appropriately doled out so that people are not paying exorbitant prices for childcare. And again, it's even more difficult, or especially difficult for low-income families, to find proper childcare for people, for their children below elementary school age. And I want to talk a little bit more about kind of the nature of this problem, particularly how workers just aren't making enough money. So I'll go on. This article goes on to say, Michigan workers simply can't get ahead of rising costs because jobs, while plentiful, do not pay enough. Now, this is something very important I wanted to touch on because, frankly, this is a story. This is kind of a talking point that we've heard from both the Obama and Trump administrations. They point to low unemployment and their ability to increase the overall number of jobs as a credit to their administration, a credit to their economic policies. It's important to point this out because both of them are obscuring the very important fact that while unemployment has gone down, the quality of those jobs is nowhere near historically where quality of many working class jobs were, particularly kind of the idealized golden age 60s and 70s, where you could essentially make a very comfortable income with a high school diploma, working in manufacturing, et cetera, et cetera. With Obama, that was the narrative. They tried to buck up against Donald Trump in his campaign a couple years ago, talking about, look at all the job creation that's taking place under our administration. What kind of jobs were created? McJobs, jobs at Walmart, jobs at Amazon, jobs in the gig economy that have very little economic security. And these were replacing, again, the jobs that were outsourced, jobs that continuously are being automated, and replaced with jobs that are more stressful and pay less. This has continued under the Trump administration. And again, Donald Trump and his sycophants will often point to the numbers and say, look, unemployment has gone down even more. But again, look what's actually going on in the kind of swamp that is the Trump administration. Left and right, they are loosening the restrictions. They are loosening workers' rights. So again, their actual working conditions are getting worse. Their pay is getting lessened. All the while, they can point to these very superficial numbers, these superficial low unemployment numbers, when in fact, yes, people are employed, but they're employed in jobs that do not pay them what they need to basically live. I'm going to kind of personalize this real quick with an anecdote, but I think it really illustrates the crux of the problem here. So back when the polar vortex came to visit, I was one of the volunteers that were kind of helped out at the emergency shelters set up at the churches. The most common request that I heard when I worked overnight at these churches from folks who were houseless, homeless, were, can you wake me up for work? Most of the people who were staying in those churches to protect themselves from the elements, temperatures so cold that if you were to try to camp out, you would likely freeze to death. They asked to get woke up for work. There's people who worked at Bronson, people who worked at some of the greenhouses, people who worked at jobs that, frankly, a number of years ago should have had the security necessary to at least have a roof over your head. I remember talking to one gentleman who used to live over on the north side. He was talking about how he lived at this house for like the most of his life. The property got sold out from under him. He was homeless. He needed to go to work. He was asking me, where can you help me, like, with some housing assistance? I'm just trying to find a place that I can afford to live. And again, that is where we're at. The problem is not necessarily unemployment. It's that we have a working poor that is so poor that they can't even keep a roof over their head. They can't even keep themselves fed. They can't even provide themselves adequate health care. So I'm going on to read from this article. Michigan workers simply can't get ahead of rising costs because jobs, while plentiful, do not pay enough. Roughly 61% of jobs in Michigan pay less than $20 per hour. And by the way, I'd like to point out, if the minimum wage had tracked with inflation, the current minimum wage would be around $24 an hour. Anyway, they said with nearly 2/3 of those paying less than $15 an hour, according to data gathered for the report by the U.S. Bureau of Labor and Statistics. The greatest jobs gains in Michigan between 2010 and 2017, and this really brings home the point I was bringing up earlier, were in occupations that paid between $9.43 an hour and $15.91 per hour. Retail jobs, for example, increased 12% between 2010 and 2017, but wages only rose 5%. Assembly and fabricator jobs grew 64% between 2010 and 2017, but wages declined 1% over the same period, according to the study. So you have wage increases that are either glacially slow, do not track with the cost of living at all, or in that case, actually decrease over time. And it goes on to say too, the greatest population being hit by this are actually older folks who are finding it more difficult to retire. The baby boomers, etc. Also, of course, it said all races saw increases in the working poor population. Hispanic and Asian households became poorer between 2010 and 2017. Increases below the threshold growing 28% among the Hispanic population and 43% among the Asian population in Michigan. So, the overall point to take away here, and I've talked about how, this is kind of a bipartisan issue when it comes to just this assault on workers' rights, workers' pay, etc. But, it speaks to a much larger issue of how the kind of jobs that are replacing the old jobs in the manufacturing sector are not good ones. They are less than subsistence level. They're jobs that can't even support basic housing and food and the basic necessities you need for life. This is what happens when capitalism runs amok and reaches a late stage where Republican and Democratic administrations will pat themselves on the back for decreasing unemployment, while people, the working poor, are working longer hours for lower wages, as New Deal Grandpa said. And they have to go to a church, a pop-up emergency church shelter to keep from freezing to death, while making sure they can make it to work in time, so they don't lose the meager subsistence income that they can have access to. So again, if you want to read that article yourself, you can find that. It's at cranesdetroit.com. Michigan's working poor grows to 43% of all households. So I want to briefly talk about an issue that we're going to dive into in greater depth in the coming weeks. But this happened at a local school. A student found with loaded gun at Kalamazoo School over at K Central. This was published today. And here's what really struck me. I'm going to read a little bit from it. A 16-year-old male student was pulled out of his classroom Tuesday, March 19th, after school officials were tipped off that the student had a gun in his possession. In the wake of the incidents, Kalamazoo Public Schools official declined for... so... I want to go out... what the student said was the student told officials he had the gun on him for protection. He said he'd been threatened by people, quote-unquote, on the north side, the report said. The student did not say whether the threats came from any individual at the high school. Police noted in the report that the student lived on the east side of town. So, when I was growing up, I grew up over on the south side in the Edison neighborhood. And this was a palpable issue back then as it is now. This idea is like, if you're from the wrong side of town, people will try to beef with you. People will... I used to be told, if you're from the Edison, don't go to the north side. Northsiders don't like people from the south side. They don't like people from the east side. Eastsiders don't like people from the south side. And of course, we talk about how, again, this kind of enmity between working poor people in different neighborhoods in Kalamazoo is kind of ridiculous on its face, but it's something that does exist. This kind of gang-related resentment. I mean, it's not explicitly gang-related, but this kind of enmity, artificial enmity, I'd say, gets built up between people in the different kind of neighborhood blocks here in Kalamazoo. Now, again, where does this come from? It comes from culture, but particularly what intersection of culture? When you have neighborhoods that have been neglected and continue to be neglected by the city, something we talk a lot about on the show is like even with all this money coming in from the Foundation for Excellence, it's still places like Westnedge Hills, Winchell, etc., who see this money first, and neighborhoods like the North Side and South Side that only see and don't really see tangible investment. It creates the conditions for kind of a gangster culture to take root. And again, I'm speaking as somebody who kind of grew up in this environment, where, again, you come up with these flimsy reasons to incite violence, resentment against people who live on a different part of town, but tangibly are in the same rickety boat as you are. There's another article that came out talking about there was a grant that Kalamazoo Public Schools will be getting from the state. Ends up totaling about $600,000. We're going to be talking about it next week in a little bit greater depth. But the idea is that Kalamazoo Public Schools just got a big grant to improve and increase security. Now, where am I going with this? There's a problem that, our schools, again, continue to look more and more like prison. And when you have this kind of level of violence or the threat of violence in our poor and working class neighborhoods, it becomes this very unhealthy feedback loop. The schools feel like they need higher security. The students feel increasingly unsafe, and the schools themselves increasingly begin to look more and more like a prison than a school. Now, again, I don't want to jump to too many conclusions. The implications of the security grants have not been completely fleshed out, and I don't want to paint it with a broad brush. But these issues are very much related. Just last week, we had Gwen on to talk about Ukanda going on the North Side. And one of the things she brought up is that, one of the main issues that she talked about with young people here in Kalamazoo in these working class neighborhoods was gun violence. And, it has to do to, the root of this kind of violence and these kinds of threats has to do with a certain nihilism, a certain despair that happens in these neighborhoods when you do not see a pathway to improving your material conditions. You don't see a pathway for your people, then this kind of nihilistic violence will become more appealing to you. Particularly because you find yourself, when you are desperate, you want to latch on to any kind of identity that you can. So you say, well, I am a North Sider, or I'm a South Sider, or, I'm from the East Side, or something that had a lot of cultural weight and capital when I had grown up. If you grew up on Hayes Park, then you were a bad MFer. But sorry, I was kind of laughing about that a little bit, but we end up finding our young people pigeonholing themselves into these very fragile identities because there is an abject sense of hopelessness. And what do we need to do? Well, we need to collectively reinvest in our communities and of course, make sure that we do what we can to make sure our young people don't go down these paths. But again, it's symptomatic of much larger issues. Again, what that article we were just talking about. What do you tell a young person who's going to be facing a state economy where the best he's promised is a job that can't even provide him with a place to live. Where else is there to go beyond that kind of identity that pits neighborhood against neighborhood? Again, it's the perspective. When you see this kind of violence and happen in our schools and our communities, there's always a root to it. That root is inherently economic. When you rob people of the resources they need, when you squeeze out the working class and provide them with an environment where the pittance that they're offered can't even give them their basic necessities, then they are going to turn inward. They are going to turn into these kind of identity groups, and they are going to resort to this kind of nihilistic violence. And it is something we face here in Kalamazoo. Again, you might say it's not quite as bad as some larger cities, but again, if we don't address the roots of these issues, if we don't create better communities that are more economically stable, then this is a problem that is only going to persist, and it really is not going to matter how much security or how many metal detectors we end up having at Loy Norks or K Central. It is not going to do anything to address the roots of this violence. And again, if the school is more secure, then this is just violence it's going to find somewhere else to go. It's going to happen in the streets. It's going to happen in the neighborhoods. We need to do more to holistically solve these problems, and a security grant, however this ends up actually realizing itself, is not going to solve this problem. So with that, let's go ahead and take a little bit of a break. Y'all listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. I think after this, I've just got a couple of quick hits, and with that, we might close out the show a little bit early. Y'all listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo.